had always loved solitude. The hustle and bustle of city life, the endless noise, the suffocating routine, it all made me crave something untouched, something wild. When I found a tiny village tucked deep within a forest on an old map, my curiosity turned into obsession. Its name was never spoken aloud on official documents, and locals in nearby towns warned me not to go, citing strange disappearances and odd tales. But warnings have always been the kind of bait I couldn't resist. The journey was longer than I expected. Twisting roads turned into dirt paths, and soon, my car's tires sank slightly into the mud. The air grew thick, damp, and heavy with the smell of wet pine and decaying leaves. As the sun began its slow descent, shadows lengthened, creeping into corners I didn't know existed. Eventually, I saw it. A cluster of wooden houses with thatched roofs, smoke curling from crooked chimneys, and narrow pathways winding like veins between them. It was breathtakingly archaic, like a scene preserved from centuries ago. I parked near the edge of the village, stepping out to hear nothing but the crunch of leaves beneath my boots. The silence was almost suffocating. I remembered the warning. Once you enter, you may never leave the same. Shaking off the unease, I moved forward. The first villager I saw was an old woman carrying a basket of mushrooms. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes shone with an unsettling intensity. She looked at me, paused, and then muttered something under her breath that I couldn't understand. I smiled, tried to greet her, but she just scowled and continued on her way. Strange, I murmured. Yet, I felt an irresistible pull toward the center of the village, where the town square seemed to sit like the beating heart of the place. A well, cracked and moss-covered, stood in its center, surrounded by benches and a few scattered market stalls. No one was selling anything. No one approached me. It felt like I had walked into a painting, beautiful yet eerie in its stillness. I wandered from house to house, trying to find someone who might explain the village's history, its people, anything. Finally, I found a small inn, a two-story building made of dark oak with flower boxes on its windows, though the flowers were wilted. The innkeeper, a tall man with a gaunt face, met me at the door. "You're not from here," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was soft but carried a weight, like a warning I hadn't anticipated. "I'm visiting," I replied cautiously. "You shouldn't," he said simply before opening the door for me. Inside, the air was warm but smelled faintly of smoke and herbs. A fire crackled in the corner, its orange glow casting shadows that seemed to move independently of the flames. I checked in, though I didn't quite know why I felt compelled to stay. There was something in the man's eyes, a mix of sorrow and fear, that made me both wary and curious. The room was small but cozy, with a window overlooking the forest beyond. I set down my bag and sat on the bed, trying to understand my sudden anxiety. I felt like I had stepped out of time, as though the village existed on a different plane, untouched by the world I knew. Something about it felt alive, and not in a welcoming way. That night, I couldn't sleep. Through the window, I saw the forest sway, even though there was no wind. Shadows shifted in unnatural patterns, and I could have sworn I heard faint whispers carried on the cold night air. Eventually, I convinced myself it was my imagination, the result of isolation and fatigue. But at midnight, the whispers turned into voices, clear, deliberate, and haunting. They seemed to call my name, urging me toward the woods. Something compelled me to answer, to move, and before I realized it, I was stepping outside, flashlight in hand. The village was empty, silent, as if it had paused just for me. I followed the sound, deeper and deeper into the dense trees. The forest changed as I went further. The trees grew taller, twisted, and gnarled, blocking out the moonlight. Shadows wrapped around me like living things, and the ground seemed to pulse under my feet. And then I saw it, a faint glow in a clearing ahead. My heart raced. Curiosity overrode fear. When I reached the clearing, I found a small stone altar, surrounded by torches whose flames burned without wind. Figures cloaked in black robes stood in a circle, chanting words I didn't understand. Their faces were hidden beneath hoods, but their voices were hypnotic, rhythmic, and terrifyingly synchronized. I froze, rooted to the spot. Then one of them noticed me. The figure pointed directly at me. In an instant, the chanting stopped. Silence enveloped the clearing like a physical force. I turned to run, but my legs refused to obey. The air itself seemed to resist my movement. One of the cloaked figures stepped forward and slowly removed their hood. Beneath it was a woman with piercing eyes, almost luminous in the torchlight. Her gaze was both alluring and horrifying. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was melodic but carried a weight that made my chest tighten. "But now that you are, you must choose." "Choose what?" I stammered, panic rising in my throat. "To stay or to leave forever," she replied. Around her, the villagers watched silently. I realized then that the old woman and the innkeeper were among them. Their eyes weren't human. They glowed faintly, reflecting the torchlight in a way that made my stomach churn. "You cannot leave as you came," she said, stepping closer. "This village, it doesn't let go of its secrets." I stumbled backward, my mind racing. Memories of the warnings, the map, the old tales, all rushed back, filling me with dread. I want to leave," I whispered. My voice was almost swallowed by the thick air of the forest. "You may," she said, "but your world will no longer be the same." In that moment, the forest seemed to come alive. Shadows surged, and whispers filled the air once more, now louder, more insistent. My body moved, almost against my will, drawn toward the altar. I struggled, screamed, but the force pulling me forward was relentless. The woman reached out, her hand brushing mine. It was cold, yet electrifying. A vision flashed before my eyes. The village, the villagers, their long lives hidden from the world, their rituals that sustain the forest's strange, almost sentient presence. And me, becoming part of it, or losing myself forever if I resisted. I fell to my knees, trembling, tears streaming down my face. The villagers began their chant again, slower this time, almost hypnotic. And then, a sudden clarity came over me. I didn't want to be part of this. I didn't want immortality at the cost of my soul, my identity, my freedom. Summoning every ounce of willpower, I screamed, "I refuse." The torches flickered violently, and a wind unlike any natural breeze tore through the clearing. Shadows twisted, and for a moment, I felt as though the forest itself tried to consume me. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The villagers disappeared, the altar crumbled to dust, and the forest became silent and still.